Deep in the heart of a quiet, forgotten village surrounded by dense woods, there lived a young girl named Mira. She was only 17, but life had already handed her more than her fair share of struggles. Her parents had passed away when she was just a child, leaving her and her aging grandmother to fend for themselves. Their small wooden cottage creaked with every gust of wind, its roof patched together with mismatched shingles. Every day was a battle against hunger and hardship, yet Mira never complained. Instead, she worked tirelessly, collecting firewood, washing clothes for neighbors, or selling wild berries at the market to ensure they had enough to survive. 1. Crisp autumn morning, Mira woke up earlier than usual. The air carried a chill that hinted winter wasn't too far away. Wrapping herself in a worn-out shawl, she grabbed her basket and headed toward the forest. It was a place she knew well, having spent countless hours among the towering trees gathering mushrooms, herbs, and sticks for kindling. The forest was both beautiful and mysterious, filled with sounds of rustling leaves, chirping birds, and the occasional snap of a twig underfoot. But today felt different somehow. As Mira walked deeper into the woods, an uneasy feeling settled over her, like someone or something was watching her. She pushed the thought aside and focused on her task. Firewood was becoming scarce near the edge of the forest, so she ventured further inside than usual. After about an hour of searching, her basket was nearly full. Just as she bent down to pick up another fallen branch, she noticed something unusual, tucked beneath a pile of damp leaves. At first glance, it looked like an old wicker basket, but as she brushed away the debris, her breath caught in her throat. Inside the basket lay 3 tiny infants, no older than a few weeks, wrapped in thin, tattered blankets. They were crying softly, their little faces scrunched up in discomfort, their tiny hands clutching at the air. Mira froze, unsure of what to do. Her mind raced with questions. Who would leave 3 helpless babies alone in the middle of the forest? Were they abandoned, lost, hurt? Whatever the reason, one thing was clear. These children needed help, and fast. Without wasting another moment, Mira knelt beside the basket and gently scooped it up. The weight of the responsibility hit her immediately. She barely had enough food to feed herself and her grandmother, let alone 3 newborns. Still, she couldn't bring herself to leave them behind. Taking a deep breath, she adjusted the basket in her arms and began the long walk back home. The journey back seemed longer than usual, each step heavier than the last. The cries of the babies grew, louder, piercing through the silence of the forest. Mira tried to soothe them by humming a soft tune, though she doubted they could understand. Her heart ached with worry. What would her grandmother say? Would she even approve of bringing strangers into their already struggling household? And then there was the bigger question. How would they manage to take care of 3 infants with almost nothing to their name? When Mira finally reached the cottage, her grandmother was sitting by the hearth knitting a scarf from scraps of wool. The sight of her frail figure made Mira hesitate. How could she burden her already weakened grandmother with this? But before she could decide what to do, her grandmother looked up and gasped. "What is that?" she asked, her voice trembling. "It's babies," Mira stammered, setting the basket down carefully. "I found them in the forest." Her grandmother stared at the infants, her weathered face etched with concern. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then slowly, her grandmother reached out and touched one of the baby's cheeks. "Poor things," she murmured, "they're freezing." Together, they worked quickly to warm the babies. Mira tore strips of fabric from an old sheet to swaddle them tighter, while her grandmother heated water to mix with powdered milk, a luxury they rarely used. As the babies drank greedily, Mira felt a strange mixture of relief and dread wash over her. Relief because they were safe, for now, and dread because she knew this was only the beginning of a much larger challenge. That night, as the cottage grew quiet and the babies fell asleep, Mira sat by the window staring out at the darkened forest. Questions swirled in her mind. Who were these children? Why had they been left behind? And most importantly, what was she supposed to do next? She didn't have answers, but one thing was certain. Her life would never be the same again. Little did she know, this discovery would set off a chain of events that would test her strength, resilience, and courage in ways she could never imagine. The days that followed Mira's discovery were nothing short of overwhelming. Caring for 3 newborns proved to be far more challenging than she had anticipated. Each baby seemed to have its own unique needs, and their cries echoed through the small cottage day and night. Mira barely slept, constantly juggling feeding, changing, and soothing them. Her grandmother did her best to help, but her frail body couldn't keep up with the demands of caring for 3 infants. The weight of responsibility rested squarely on Mira's young shoulders. Food quickly became a major issue. Mira's meager earnings from odd jobs were barely enough to feed herself and her grandmother before the babies arrived, let alone now. She stretched every resource to its limits, diluting milk powder with water to make it last longer, and softening stale bread in tea to create makeshift porridge. Sometimes she would venture into the forest again to gather wild berries or edible roots, hoping to find something nutritious for the babies. But no matter how hard she tried, there never seemed to be enough. As word spread about the mysterious babies found in the woods, whispers began to ripple through the village. People talked behind closed doors, speculating about where the infants came from and why Mira had taken them in. Some admired her kindness, calling her brave for stepping up when others might have turned away. Others, however, were less charitable. They accused her of being reckless, saying that a poor girl like her had no business taking care of children who weren't hers. A few even suggested darker motives, hinting that perhaps the babies were somehow connected to her in ways she wasn't revealing. The gossip reached its peak one afternoon when Mira went to the market to buy supplies. She stood in line at the baker's stall, clutching a few coins tightly in her hand. As she waited, she overheard 2 women whispering nearby. "Did you hear?" one said, glancing pointedly at Mira. "She claims she found those babies in the forest." But isn't it strange? 3 infants all at once. No mother in her right mind would abandon so many unless, well, you know. Mira felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment and anger. She wanted to confront them, to tell them they didn't understand what she was going through, but instead she bit her lip and turned away, focusing on counting her coins. She knew arguing wouldn't change their minds. It would only give them more ammunition to use against her. Back at home, Mira poured out her frustrations to her grandmother. "Why does everyone have to judge me?" she asked, tears welling up in her eyes. "I didn't ask for this to happen, I just couldn't leave them there to die." Her grandmother sighed, patting her hand gently. "People are afraid of things they don't understand," she said softly. "And sometimes, fear makes them cruel. Don't let their words get to you, child. You're doing the right thing." But even with her grandmother's reassurance, Mira couldn't shake off the feeling of isolation. The villagers who once greeted her warmly now avoided her gaze or hurried past her on the street. Children teased her, calling her names like baby thief or forest witch. Even some of her regular customers stopped hiring her for chores, claiming they needed someone more reliable. With each passing day, Mira felt the walls closing in around her. Winter loomed closer, bringing with it biting winds and shorter days. The cold seeped into the cottage, making it harder to keep the babies warm. Mira patched holes in the walls with scraps of cloth and burned whatever wood she could scavenge, but it wasn't enough. One particularly frigid night, she bundled all 3 babies together in a single blanket, holding them close to her chest to share her body heat. Exhaustion pulled at her, but she forced herself to stay awake, checking on them every few minutes to ensure they were still breathing. Despite the hardships, there were moments of unexpected joy. Watching the babies sleep peacefully, their tiny chests rising and falling in rhythm, filled Mira with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt before. There was something profound about knowing that she was giving these vulnerable little lives a chance they wouldn't have had if she hadn't found them. In those quiet moments, she allowed herself to dream of a better future, not just for the babies but for herself as well. Yet reality always came crashing back. The strain of caring for the infants took a toll on Mira's health. She grew thinner, her face pale and drawn from lack of proper nutrition and rest. Her hands, once smooth despite years of hard work, were now rough and cracked from constant washing and scrubbing. Still, she refused to give up. Every time she thought about leaving the babies at an orphanage or handing them over to someone else, guilt gnawed at her. They had trusted her to save them, and she couldn't betray that trust. One evening, as she rocked one of the babies to sleep, Mira made a decision. She couldn't keep living like this, scrambling to survive while fending off judgmental stares and cruel remarks. If she was going to provide for the babies properly, she needed answers. She needed to know who they were, where they came from, and why they had been abandoned. Only then could she figure out what to do next. The following morning, after ensuring the babies were fed and settled, Mira returned to the spot in the forest where she had found the basket. This time, she searched more thoroughly, combing through the area for any clues that might shed light on the mystery. Among the fallen leaves and broken twigs, she discovered traces of a makeshift campsite, a circle of charred stones, remnants of a fire, and pieces of torn fabric caught on brambles. Something about the scene felt deliberate, as though someone had been hiding here for a while before leaving in a hurry. Then, nestled among the debris, she found a small object glinting faintly in the sunlight. It was a silver locket. Its surface, scratched but intact. Heart-pounding, Mira opened it carefully. Inside was a faded photograph of a smiling couple holding one of the babies. On the back of the locket, engraved in delicate script, were two initials, E.M. Mira stared at the locket, her mind racing. Who were these people, and why had they left their children behind? Clutching the locket tightly, she resolved to uncover the truth. Whatever it took, she would find out who these babies belonged to, and why they had ended up in the forest. Little did she know the answers would lead her down a path she could never have imagined, testing her courage and determination in ways she hadn't thought possible. Mira's discovery of the locket ignited a spark of determination within her. For the first time since finding the babies, she felt like she had a tangible lead, a clue that might help her unravel the mystery surrounding their origins. Clutching the locket tightly in her hand, she made her way back to the cottage, her mind buzzing with questions. Who were E.M.? Why had they left the babies in the forest? And most importantly, what had driven them to abandon their own children? That evening, after tucking the babies into makeshift cradles and ensuring they were asleep, Mira sat by the dim light of a flickering oil lamp. She opened the locket again, studying the faded photograph inside. The couple in the picture looked happy, their smiles warm and genuine as they held one of the infants. It was hard to imagine that these same people could have left their children to fend for themselves in the cold, dark forest. Something about the situation didn't add up. Her grandmother noticed her troubled expression and asked, "What is it, child?" Mira showed her the locket. "I found this near where I discovered the babies," she explained. "These must be their parents, or at least someone close to them. But why would they leave such a precious thing behind?" Her grandmother squinted at the photograph, then gently traced the engraved initials with her finger. "E.M.," she murmured thoughtfully. "It could stand for anything. Names, places, even organizations. But if we want answers, we'll need to start asking questions." The next morning, Mira set out on a mission. She decided to visit nearby villages and towns, hoping someone might recognize the couple in the photograph or know something about the initials. Her journey began with the closest village, a small community nestled along the riverbank. As she walked through its narrow streets, she approached shopkeepers, farmers, and anyone else who might have information. She showed them the locket, explaining how she had found the babies and asking if they knew anything about the people in the picture. Most people shook their heads, claiming they had never seen the couple before. Some offered sympathy, but little else. However, one elderly woman who ran a small bakery paused when Mira showed her the photograph. Her eyes widened slightly, and she leaned closer to examine it. "This man, he looks familiar," she said, hesitantly. "But I can't place him. Maybe you should try asking in Alderidge. It's a bigger town and people there are more connected to the cities." Encouraged by the baker's suggestion, Mira thanked her and continued her search. Alderidge was several miles away, and the journey took nearly half a day on foot. By the time she arrived, her legs ached and her spirits were low. Still, she pressed on, visiting markets, inns, and even the local church, showing the locket to anyone who would listen. In Alderidge, Mira met a young scribe named Lila, who worked at the town hall transcribing records. Lila was intrigued by Mira's story and agreed to help her investigate. Together, they pored over old documents and registries, searching for any mention of the initials EM, or families with triplets. Hours passed, and just as Mira was beginning to lose hope, Lila let out a soft gasp. "I think I've found something," she said, pointing to a line in a dusty ledger. "There's a record here of a wealthy family, the Montclairs. Their estate is located on the outskirts of the city. They're known for being influential in politics and business." Mira's heart raced. Could this be the family she was looking for? She thanked Lila profusely and hurried toward the Montclair estate, her mind swirling with possibilities. The mansion loomed large against the horizon, its grandeur a stark contrast to the humble life Mira knew. She hesitated at the gates, unsure of how to approach such a powerful household. But remembering the faces of the babies waiting for her, back home she summoned her courage and knocked. A stern-looking butler answered the door and reluctantly allowed her inside after hearing her explanation. Mira was led to a lavish sitting room where she waited anxiously for what felt like an eternity. Finally, a tall, well-dressed man entered the room. His sharp features and piercing gaze made Mira feel small, but she stood her ground. "I believe. These belong to your family," she said, holding out the locket. The man's expression faltered for a split second, though he quickly masked it with indifference. He examined the locket closely, his hands trembling ever so slightly. "Where did you find this?" he demanded, his voice clipped. Mira recounted her story, explaining how she had discovered the babies in the forest and later found the locket nearby. The man listened silently, his face unreadable. When she finished, he sighed heavily and sank into a chair. "My name is Edward Montclair," he admitted. "And yes, those children are mine. My wife. She passed away during childbirth. I couldn't care for all three of them alone, not with my responsibilities. I hoped that someone would find them and give them a better life than I could provide." His words hit Mira like a punch to the gut. She had expected many things, but not this confession. Anger bubbled inside her, but she forced herself to remain calm. "You abandoned them in the forest," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "They could have died. How could you do that to your own children?" Edward looked away, shame etched across his face. "I know what I did was wrong," he admitted. "I panicked. I wasn't thinking clearly. Please tell me. Are they safe? Are they alive?" "Yes, they're alive," Mira replied sharply. "Because I found them. Because I've been taking care of them, feeding them, keeping them warm, while you sat here in your big house pretending nothing happened." Edward flinched at her words but nodded. "I deserve your anger," he said quietly. "But I swear, I'll make this right. I'll take full responsibility for my actions." Though part of Mira wanted to refuse his offer outright, she knew the babies deserved better than the life she could provide. Reluctantly, she agreed to bring them to him, though she made it clear that she wouldn't simply hand them over without ensuring they would be cared for properly. When she returned home, Mira shared the news with her grandmother, who listened silently before offering her wisdom. "This isn't an easy decision, child," she said, "but sometimes doing the right thing means letting go. Just remember, you gave those babies a chance at life when no one else would. That's something no one can ever take away from you." With a heavy heart, Mira prepared to reunite the babies with their father. Yet as she packed their belongings and fed them one last time, she couldn't shake the feeling that her connection to them wasn't over. Not yet. Little did she know, the events set in motion by her discovery were far from finished, and the road ahead would challenge her in ways she couldn't foresee. The decision to return the babies to Edward Montclair weighed heavily on Mira. She had spent weeks pouring her heart and soul into caring for them, sacrificing everything she had to ensure their survival. Now, the thought of handing them over, to a man who had once abandoned them felt wrong, no matter how sincere his promises seemed. But deep down, Mira knew she couldn't provide the kind of life they deserved, a life filled with warmth, security, and opportunities she could never offer. Still, saying goodbye was going to be one of the hardest things she'd ever done. As she prepared for the journey to the Montclair estate, an unexpected visitor arrived at her doorstep. Elias, the reclusive carpenter who lived on the outskirts of the village. Tall and broad-shouldered, with calloused hands and a quiet demeanor, Elias rarely interacted with anyone, yet somehow he had taken notice of Mira's struggles. Over the past few weeks, he had occasionally stopped by to check on her, bringing firewood or small gifts of food without asking for anything in return. His presence had been a comforting constant during some of her darkest days. When Elias saw Mira packing the baby's belongings, his brow furrowed with concern. "You're leaving?" he asked, his voice low but steady. Mira nodded, avoiding his gaze. "I'm taking them back to their father," she explained quietly. "He came forward. He says he wants to make things right." Elias didn't respond immediately. Instead, he stepped inside the cottage and looked around, taking in the worn furniture, the patched-up walls, and the makeshift cradles that lined the corner. Then he turned his attention to the babies, watching as Mira carefully swaddled each one in soft blankets. There was a tenderness in his expression that surprised her. It was as if he understood exactly what she was feeling. "You've done more for those children than most people would," Elias said finally, breaking the silence. "But are you sure this is what's best for them? And for you?" Mira sighed, her shoulders slumping under the weight of uncertainty. "I don't know what else to do," she admitted. "Their father has money, resources, things I'll never have. They deserve better than what I can give them." Elias nodded thoughtfully, then crouched down beside her. "Sometimes, doing the right thing doesn't mean giving up completely," he said gently. "If you care about these babies, and I can see that you do, you should stay involved. Make sure they're treated well. Don't just walk away and leave them behind." His words struck a chord deep within Mira. She realized that while she might not be able to raise all 3 babies herself, she didn't have to sever ties entirely. Perhaps there was a way to find balance, to ensure they remained part of her life, even if circumstances changed. With renewed determination, Mira packed the last of the items and bundled the babies into a borrowed cart. Elias insisted on accompanying her to the Montclair estate, citing practical reasons like helping carry supplies and keeping an eye on the road. But Mira suspected his true motive was to support her emotionally. For the first time in weeks, she felt less alone. The journey to the estate was long and tiring, but having Elias by her side made it bearable. Along the way, they talked about everything: the challenges of raising the babies, the hostility Mira had faced from the villagers, and even their own dreams for the future. Elias revealed that he had once dreamed of building ships, traveling to distant lands and seeing the world beyond the forest. But life had other plans for him, and he ended up staying in the village, crafting furniture and repairing tools instead. Despite his regrets, there was a quiet contentment in his voice, a sense that he had found peace in simplicity. When they finally reached the Montclair estate, Mira's nerves returned in full force. The mansion loomed before them, its grandeur both awe-inspiring and intimidating. A servant greeted them at the gate and escorted them inside, where Edward Montclair awaited in the same opulent sitting room from their previous meeting. This time, however, the atmosphere was different. Edward stood as Mira entered, his expression a mix of guilt and gratitude. Beside him sat a middle-aged woman whom he introduced as his sister Evelyn. She had agreed to help care for the babies after hearing about the situation. Together, they assured Mira that measures were being taken to ensure the children's well-being. A nanny had been hired, new cribs had been ordered, and plans were underway to renovate a wing of the house specifically for the babies. Despite their assurances, Mira remained cautious. She handed over the babies one by one, her heart breaking with each farewell. As she placed the youngest, the boy named Leo, into Evelyn's arms, tears welled up in her eyes. Of all the babies, Leo had always seemed closest to her, responding to her voice and touch in ways the others hadn't. Letting him go felt like losing a piece of herself. Edward noticed her hesitation and approached her cautiously. "Miss Mira," he began, his tone softer than before, "I owe you my deepest thanks. You saved my children when I failed them. If there's anything I can do to repay you—" Mira hesitated, glancing at Elias, who gave her an encouraging nod. "There is something," she said firmly. "I want to stay involved in their lives, not because I expect anything in return, but because I love them. They're a part of me now." Edward exchanged a glance with his sister, then nodded, slowly. "Very well," he said. "We'll arrange regular visits and perhaps you'd consider keeping one of them with you. It's clear how much you care for Leo. We'd understand if you wanted to raise him yourself." The offer caught Mira off guard. She looked at Leo, whose wide eyes seemed to mirror her own emotions. Could she really take on the responsibility of raising him alone? And yet, the idea of separating him from his siblings felt equally unbearable. Elias stepped forward then, speaking for the first time since they arrived. "If you decide to keep him, you won't be alone," he said, addressing both Mira and Edward. "I'll help however I can. We'll figure it out together." For the first time in what felt like forever, Mira allowed herself to hope. With Elias by her side and Edward's reluctant blessing, she agreed to take Leo home with her. The decision wasn't easy, but it felt right, as though fate itself had guided her to this moment. As they left the estate, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the countryside. Mira held Leo close, feeling his tiny heartbeat against her chest. Though challenges undoubtedly lay ahead, she knew she wasn't facing them alone. With Elias's unwavering support and the love of a child who had already stolen her heart, she was ready to embrace whatever the future held. The days that followed Mira's decision to keep Leo were a whirlwind of emotions. On one hand, she felt a profound sense of relief, knowing that at least one of the babies would remain with her. On the other hand, the weight of responsibility pressed down on her like never before. Raising a child, especially under such challenging circumstances, was no small feat. Yet, as she looked into Leo's bright, curious eyes, she couldn't imagine life without him. He had become her anchor, her reason to keep pushing forward. Despite the odds stacked against her, Elias proved to be an invaluable ally during this time. True to his word, he didn't hesitate to lend a helping hand wherever it was needed. Whether it was crafting a sturdy crib out of reclaimed wood, fixing the leaky roof of Mira's cottage, or simply sitting by the fire while she rested, Elias made sure she never felt overwhelmed. His quiet presence brought a stability to their lives that Mira hadn't realized they were missing. Slowly but surely, a bond began to form between them, not just as friends, but as partners united by a shared purpose. Despite these moments of hope and connection, challenges continued to arise. The villagers, who had already judged Mira harshly for taking in the abandoned babies, now whispered even louder about her decision to keep Leo. Some accused her of greed, claiming she must have coerced Edward Montclair into letting her keep the child because of his wealth and status. Others questioned Elias's involvement, speculating that their partnership was more than just practical. The rumors stung, but Mira refused to let them dictate how she lived her life. She focused instead on providing Leo with the love and care he deserved, determined to prove everyone wrong. One afternoon, as Mira walked through the village square carrying Leo in her arms, she overheard two women gossiping behind a stall. "Can you believe her audacity?" one muttered loud enough for Mira to hear. "She thinks she can raise a Montclair baby? What does she know about raising children, let alone ones from a rich family?" Mira paused, her cheeks flushing with anger. For a moment she considered confronting them, but then she glanced down at Leo, who was gurgling happily, completely oblivious to the world around him. Instead of engaging, she held her head high and walked away, choosing to focus on the joy radiating from her little boy rather than the venomous words of others. Later that evening, as she rocked Leo to sleep, Elias stopped by with a basket of fresh vegetables and bread. He noticed the tension in her expression immediately. "What happened?" he asked softly, setting the basket down on the table. Mira hesitated, unsure if she wanted to burden him with her frustrations. But something in his steady gaze encouraged her to open up. "It's the villagers," she admitted. "They won't stop talking about us, about me keeping Leo. They think I'm trying to climb above my station or use him for money." Elias frowned, his jaw tightening slightly. "They don't understand what you've done," he said firmly. "You saved those babies when no one else cared. You gave them a chance at life. And now you're giving Leo everything you possibly can. That's not greed, that's love." His words soothed her frazzled nerves, reminding her why she had chosen this path in the first place. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that the villagers' hostility might escalate. She voiced her concerns to Elias, who listened intently before offering a solution. "Maybe it's time we showed them who you really are," he suggested. "Let them see the hard work you've put into caring for Leo. Let them witness the kind of person you are." Inspired by his suggestion, Mira decided to take action. Over the next few weeks, she threw herself into community projects, volunteering to help rebuild the local schoolhouse and organizing food drives for struggling families. At first, the villagers remained skeptical, but as they saw her dedication and kindness firsthand, their attitudes slowly began to shift. Some even started approaching her with questions about Leo, curious about how she managed to balance motherhood with her many responsibilities. To her surprise, Mira found herself opening up to them, sharing stories about Leo's milestones and the challenges of raising him. In doing so, she humanized herself and, by extension, Leo in their eyes. Meanwhile, her relationship with Edward Montclair remained complicated. Though he had agreed to let her keep Leo, his guilt over abandoning his children lingered. He visited, occasionally bringing expensive gifts and offering financial support, but Mira politely declined most of his offers. She didn't want Leo growing up dependent on material wealth. She wanted him to appreciate the simple joys of life, the warmth of a loving home, the beauty of nature, and the value of hard work. Edward respected her wishes, though his visits often left her feeling uneasy. There was a sadness in his eyes that she couldn't ignore, a reminder of the mistakes he couldn't undo. As autumn gave way to winter, Mira and Elias worked tirelessly to prepare for the colder months ahead. Together they insulated the cottage, repaired broken shutters, and gathered enough firewood to last until spring. One chilly evening, as they sat by the hearth watching Leo play with a wooden rattle Elias had carved for him, Mira turned to Elias with a thoughtful expression. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything. I don't know what I would have done without you." Elias smiled, his usually stoic demeanor softening. "You've done all the hard work," he replied. "I'm just here to make sure you don't have to do it alone." Their conversation lingered in the air, unspoken feelings hovering between them. Mira knew Elias cared deeply for both her and Leo, just as she cared for him. But neither of them was ready to put those feelings into words yet. For now, their shared commitment to Leo was enough to sustain them. By the time the first snowfall blanketed the village, Mira felt a newfound sense of peace. The whispers had quieted, replaced by cautious acceptance, or at least tolerance, from her neighbors. Leo was thriving, his laughter filling the cottage with warmth and light. And though challenges still lay ahead, Mira faced them with courage, knowing she wasn't alone. But just as life seemed to settle into a rhythm, an unexpected event threatened to disrupt everything. During one of Edward's visits, he arrived, with a letter in hand. A summons from the city council demanding answers about the scandal surrounding his abandonment of the babies. The news sent shockwaves through the village, reigniting old gossip and drawing unwanted attention to Mira. Once again, as reporters and curious onlookers descended upon the area, Mira realized she would need to confront the truth head-on, not just for herself, but for Leo's sake. Whatever happened next, she vowed to protect the fragile happiness she had built, no matter the cost. The arrival of the letter from the city council sent ripples of unease through the village. It wasn't just Edward Montclair who was under scrutiny. Mira found herself at the center of attention as well. Reporters flocked to the area, eager to uncover every detail about the scandalous story of a wealthy politician abandoning his children in the forest and a poor girl stepping up to save them. The media painted Mira as either a saint or a schemer, depending on which narrative suited their headlines. Some praised her selflessness, while others accused her of exploiting the situation for personal gain. For Mira, the sudden spotlight was suffocating. She had always lived quietly, avoiding unnecessary attention, but now it felt like everyone's eyes were on her. Strangers knocked on her door, asking intrusive questions about Leo and the other babies. Neighbors whispered behind her back, speculating whether she had orchestrated the entire ordeal to secure financial support from the Montclairs. Even Elias, usually calm and composed, grew frustrated by the constant intrusion into their lives. One particularly difficult morning, as Mira tried to shield Leo from the chaos outside, a group of reporters cornered her near the market. They shoved microphones in her face, firing off rapid-fire questions. Did you know Mr. Montclair before finding the babies? Are you planning to sue him for child support? How does it feel to be raising a rich man's son? Overwhelmed, Mira clutched Leo tightly to her chest and pushed past them, tears threatening to spill over. She couldn't handle this anymore. It wasn't fair to her, and it certainly wasn't fair to Leo. That evening, as she sat with Elias by the fire, she voiced her fears. "I can't let this continue," she said firmly. "Leo deserves a normal life. He shouldn't have to grow up surrounded by gossip and judgment." Elias nodded, his expression thoughtful. "You're right," he replied, "but ignoring the problem won't make it go away. If anything, you need to take control of the narrative. Show people the truth, not just about you, but about what really matters. Taking care of those babies when no one else would." Inspired by his words, Mira decided to take a bold step. With Elias's encouragement, she agreed to give an interview, not to fuel sensationalism, but to set the record straight. She chose a local journalist known for her integrity, someone who wouldn't twist her words for clicks or views. Sitting down in her modest cottage with Leo happily playing nearby, Mira recounted her story honestly and openly. She spoke about the day she discovered the babies in the forest, the struggles of caring for them, and her decision to keep Leo because she truly loved him, not because of any ulterior motive. Her sincerity resonated deeply with readers. Letters of support poured in from across the region, praising her courage and compassion. Many expressed outrage at Edward's actions, demanding accountability not just from him but also from the societal structures that allowed such neglect to happen. The tide of public opinion began to shift, and for the first time, Mira felt like she wasn't fighting alone. Meanwhile, Edward faced mounting pressure from both the council and the public. His political career was hanging by a thread, and he knew he needed to act decisively to salvage what little remained of his reputation. In a surprising move, he issued a heartfelt apology during a televised press conference. Standing beside Evelyn, who carried one of the triplets, he admitted his mistakes and vowed to dedicate himself fully to being a better father. He also publicly acknowledged Mira's role in saving his children, calling her a hero whose actions had forced him to confront his failures. While some viewed his apology as too little, too late, others saw it as a genuine attempt at redemption. For Mira, it was enough to know that Edward was finally stepping up, not just for Leo but for all three of his children. Still, she remained cautious, ensuring that her relationship with him stayed focused solely on Leo's best interests. As spring approached, bringing with it warmer days and blooming flowers, life in the village slowly returned to normal. The reporters packed up and left, and the villagers, having witnessed Mira's resilience and integrity, began treating her with newfound respect. Though whispers still lingered, they no longer carried the same sting. Instead, Mira noticed smiles and nods of acknowledgement as she walked through the market with Leo in tow. Elias continued to play an integral role in their lives, helping Mira build a small garden behind the cottage so they could grow fresh vegetables. Together, they taught Leo how to plant seeds and water the soil, instilling in him a love for nature and hard work. Watching the two of them interact filled Mira with gratitude, not just for Elias's unwavering support, but for the family they were creating together. One sunny afternoon, as Mira and Elias sat on the porch watching Leo chase butterflies, she turned to him with a soft smile. "Do you ever think about leaving this place?" she asked. "Going somewhere new, starting over?" Elias shook his head. "Not anymore," he replied. "This is home now. And besides, I've got everything I need right here." His words warmed her heart, confirming what she had begun to suspect. Their bond had grown beyond friendship. Though neither of them had said the words aloud yet, their shared commitment to Leo and to each other spoke volumes. As the years passed, Mira watched Leo grow into a bright, curious boy who brought joy to everyone around him. He visited his siblings at the Montclair estate regularly, forming a close bond with them despite their different lifestyles. Edward made a concerted effort to include Mira in important decisions regarding the children, recognizing her unique role in their lives. Looking back on her journey, Mira realized how far she had come. From a frightened young woman struggling to survive, she had transformed into a strong, compassionate mother who had defied expectations and built a life filled with love and purpose. The forest where she had once stumbled upon 3 tiny infants now symbolized not fear or hardship, but hope, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, light could still be found. And as she stood on the edge of that same forest, one crisp, spring morning, holding Leo's hand and watching the sun rise over the horizon, Mira knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, she was ready to face them. With Elias by her side and Leo's laughter echoing in her ears, she stepped forward into the future, embracing the beauty of a life shaped by kindness, resilience, and love.